They looked smart. Cleaner helms, fresh cowls, performance props, even a little extra punch from fuel and spark tweaks, the kind of upgrades that make owners feel proud and make buyers feel nervous. Because in the used market, you're not selling horsepower, you're selling confidence. Here's the twist. A lot of resale value doesn't die from hours, salt, or brand reputation. It dies from mods that introduce one deadly word: uncertainty. Aftermarket displays that don't feel verifiable, wrapped cowls that look like they're hiding a story, wiring that turns a clean motor into a mystery, tunes that can't be proven, reliability upgrades that remove factory evidence. Even when the engine runs perfect, the buyer's brain starts calculating risk and the offer drops. By the end of this video, you'll know the 10 upgrades that quietly shrink your buyer pool, invite lowball negotiations, and turn a great outboard into a deal that won't close. Let's uncover the upgrades that destroy your outboard's resale value. Number 1, aftermarket displays and data. It starts with something that feels harmless, making the helm look cleaner, more modern, more high-end. The problem is that resale is not an interior design contest. Resale is a confidence test. When buyers see a screen that is not the factory display, the first question is not, how nice does this look? It is, what am I not seeing? Most people do not realize how much trust is tied to boring, unglamorous things like engine hours, fault history, and warning logic. With factory systems, the buyer assumes the information matches what the engine control unit recorded. When the display is aftermarket, even a good one, the buyer starts thinking about mismatches. They wonder if the hours shown are the hours that matter. They wonder if an old overheat event was logged but never shown. They wonder if a sensor is failing and the screen is not reporting it the way the original equipment manufacturer intended. Here is what makes it worse. The buyer also wonders who installed it. Was it done with correct connectors, proper power protection, and clean routing? Or is there a hidden splice behind the dash that will become an intermittent fault later? Even when everything is perfect, the buyer cannot verify that quickly. They can only judge what it looks like. At some point, specific examples start creeping into the conversation. A Mercury Marine vessel view setup, a Yamaha Motor Corporation command link display, a Suzuki Motor Corporation multifunction gauge, a Honda Marine display, or any equivalent factory system tends to feel verifiable. A third-party screen can still be excellent, but to a cautious buyer, it introduces a new category: uncertainty. And uncertainty gets priced. That brings us to the next kind of upgrade, the one that does not change a single wire in the engine, but changes what the buyer believes they are looking at. Number 2, custom paint, wrapped cowls, and cosmetic blackouts. Cosmetic upgrades are tricky because they are often done for totally reasonable reasons. Sun fade looks ugly, scratches happen, people want their setup to look fresh. But the used market is not judging your taste. It is judging the story your engine tells at a glance. When the outside no longer looks like the factory finish, buyers begin building theories. Sometimes those theories are wrong. That does not matter. What matters is that the upgrade creates a fork in the buyer's mind. They start thinking, was it wrapped to hide fading, or to hide corrosion, or to hide a repaired crack, or to match a replaced cowl after an impact? Even if the seller explains it, the buyer still has to decide whether the explanation feels complete. Cosmetic changes also break a quiet resale advantage: familiarity. A factory finish lets a buyer compare what they see to what they have seen on other engines. When the cowl is custom, it is harder to tell if the surface is normal wear or something more. It is harder to spot repairs. It is harder to read the subtle cues buyers rely on. Another issue is missing factory decals and routing diagrams. Those little labels are not just decoration, they signal that nothing has been stripped down and rebuilt in an unknown way. When those are gone, some buyers interpret it as somebody has been deep inside this. That might be harmless, it might not. They cannot prove it either way in a short meeting. Brand matters here, but not in the way people think. A custom blacked out look can turn a clean Yamaha Motor Corporation outboard or a clean Mercury Marine outboard into something that feels like a project, even if it is not. The visual language changes, and the market reacts. Now we move into a modification that feels purely performance on the surface, but signals something deeper about how the engine lived its life. Number 3, aggressive propeller setups and speed chase hardware. Most buyers are not afraid of performance. What they are afraid of is evidence that performance was pursued without restraint. The propeller becomes a quiet witness in that judgment, because it is directly tied to how the engine was loaded, how often it was pushed and what the owner prioritized. It does not matter if the engine sounds healthy or looks clean. The propeller suggests a lifestyle. A conservative setup rarely excites anyone, but it closes deals. The engine climbs into its intended operating range without drama. It planes easily, carries load predictably, and never feels like it is being asked to compensate for something else. That kind of setup feels boring, and boring reads as safe. In contrast, an aggressive propeller choice introduces a different narrative. It hints at long stretches of heavy throttle, elevated temperatures, and repeated adjustments in search of a number rather than balance. Even when the engine is mechanically sound, that narrative erodes confidence. The real resale mistake is not owning a performance propeller. Plenty of knowledgeable owners do. The mistake is presenting that propeller as the default, everyday configuration. That framing suggests that the engine required tuning to feel right, or that the owner was never satisfied with how it ran from the factory. Buyers begin imagining a cycle of trial and error, running light fuel to chase speed, switching props when the engine bogged, adjusting engine height, swapping hubs, and repeating the process. None of that proves abuse, but it builds a cloud of maybe, and resale lives or dies inside that cloud. Details begin to matter quickly. If a listing shows a 150 horsepower outboard wearing a propeller, clearly selected for peak speed rather than safe loading, buyers start asking questions silently. They think about revolutions per minute at wide open throttle. They wonder whether the engine lived below its intended operating band, lugging underload with passengers and gear. They also wonder if it was overspun on calm days with minimal weight. Those questions are not accusations, they are risk calculations. The problem is that most private sellers cannot answer them in a way that satisfies a cautious buyer. They rarely have data logs, long-term operating notes, or documentation showing how the engine behaved across different conditions. Without that, the buyer defaults to caution. The propeller becomes evidence not of capability, but of uncertainty. A resale smart approach is subtle. Include a stock-style propeller with the sale and treat the performance propeller as an optional extra. That reframes the story. Instead of "this engine needed help," it becomes "this engine was normal and the owner explored options." The engine feels legible again. It feels like something the buyer can return to baseline before making their own choices. Once that sense of experimentation enters the buyer's mind, that's why the category of upgrades feels heavier, because it moves from reversible setup choices into changes that seem baked into the engine itself. Number 4, fuel and spark power mods. Some upgrades turn a clean engine into a question mark instantly. Anything that touches fuel delivery or ignition timing tends to do that because it affects the parts buyers fear most: pistons, valves, combustion temperatures, and long-term stress. Most people doing these modifications are not trying to create a ticking time bomb. They want better throttle response. They want a stronger mid-range. They want to pull a heavier load. But the used market does not reward intention. It prices risk. A buyer cannot easily verify whether a fuel controller was tuned safely, whether the air-to-fuel ratio stayed where it should, whether the engine ever ran lean, or whether the system occasionally threw a code under load. The moment buyers hear phrases like bigger injectors, high output coils, fuel controller, or aftermarket ignition, they imagine a chain reaction. More fuel and spark usually means more heat somewhere. More heat means less margin. Less margin means that a single cooling issue or a slightly clogged injector can become expensive. Even if the motor is currently fine, the buyer imagines a future where a dealer refuses to diagnose it until the engine is returned to original configuration. Modern four-stroke platforms are especially sensitive in the buyer's mind because the systems are integrated. The engine control unit expects certain sensors, certain maps, certain behaviors. A modification can work perfectly and still make troubleshooting harder later. Buyers know that, dealers definitely know that, so the resale outcome is predictable. Fewer interested buyers, longer time on the market, and offers that assume a discount for unknown tuning. The seller might insist it is safe. The buyer might even believe them, but belief is not the same as verification. After combustion questions, electrical work becomes the deal breaker. Wiring changes create intermittent fears because modern sensor networks punish tiny mistakes with random warnings that vanish mid-test. If this breakdown is changing how you look at used outboards, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Tap like if you've seen a speed setup scare buyers away, and comment below, would you trust a tuned motor, a stock one, or walk away entirely? Number 5, custom wiring wiring, non-factory harnesses, and mystery electrical work. Electrical modifications do not have to be sloppy to hurt resale, they just have to exist. That is how sensitive buyers are now, especially with modern systems that rely on sensor networks and digital communication. A clean rigging harness, routed the way the original equipment manufacturer intended, signals predictability. It signals that if something goes wrong, a technician can follow a known path. The moment the harness looks custom, the buyer imagines intermittent faults. They imagine a boat that runs perfectly during a test ride, then throws a warning 2 weeks later when humidity is high and the wiring warms up. They imagine a charging system that becomes unstable because an accessory was tied into a circuit that was never meant to carry that load. This is also where buyers start worrying about fires. That sounds dramatic, but it is a real mental leap people make when they see non-standard fusing, stacked ring terminals, and splices that do not look factory. Even if your wiring is professionally done, the buyer cannot prove that in a short viewing. All they can do is decide if they want to inherit it. Some of the worst resale scenarios happen when the engine itself is stock, but the surrounding rigging is a maze. A buyer may love the motor, but walk away because they do not want to buy the wiring story attached to it. The outboard becomes guilty by association. If you have to modify wiring, resale-friendly choices include clear labeling, proper circuit protection, marine-grade connectors, and documentation that shows what was changed and why. Most sellers do not keep that paperwork, so the market assumes the worst. Now we get into an upgrade that feels like simplicity to an experienced owner, but feels like a lifestyle requirement to the next buyer. Number 6. Oil system deletes and lubrication conversions on two-stroke engines. A lubrication conversion can be done carefully. It can even be done for understandable reasons. But in the used market, it often triggers a blunt reaction. Why? When a buyer hears that oil injection was removed and the engine now requires pre-mixed fuel, they start imagining the moment the original system failed. They wonder if the conversion happened because the system was unreliable, or because a failure nearly happened, or because the owner wanted to eliminate a risk. The irony is that even if the conversion was done to increase reliability, the buyer reads it as evidence that something was wrong. There is also the buyer pool problem. A premix engine demands behavior. It requires consistency. It punishes forgetfulness. Many buyers simply do not want that responsibility, especially if they are purchasing the engine for family use, casual trips, or a shared boat where multiple people refuel it. That reduces demand, and reduced demand lowers resale. The buyer also thinks about future service. A dealer may service it, but any deviation from factory routing invites extra labor and extra caution. The next owner might not have your confidence in the conversion. They might not know the ratio you used, the oil you trusted, or the exact steps you followed. Even if you explain it, they are still inheriting a routine. Two-stroke engines already carry a reputation in the broader market, loved by enthusiasts, questioned by cautious buyers. A lubrication conversion can push the engine further into enthusiast only, and that is rarely a resale advantage. Routine is one barrier, volume is another. A louder motor feels like proof of hard running, so buyers imagine stress, fines, complaints, plus a future return to stock. Number 7. Exhaust relief, sound mods, and let it breathe changes. Sound is emotional. It makes people feel power. It makes a boat feel alive. But sound also tells a story in the resale market, and that story is not always flattering. When an outboard has exhaust relief holes, modified midsections, or any change designed to make it louder, buyers often interpret it as a signal of high revolutions per minute use. They imagine the engine being run hard to enjoy the sound, not just to travel. They also imagine that the engine was modified because the owner cared more about sensation than longevity. That might be unfair. It still shapes offers. Some of these modifications can affect back pressure, idle behavior, and mid-range response. Even when the performance impact is minor, the resale impact can be major because the buyer thinks about two risks at once: mechanical stress and legal or social friction. They imagine the engine being too loud for their lake, their neighbors, or their local enforcement. They imagine having to explain it at a marina. They imagine being that guy. Many will not buy that problem. This is a classic resale trap. The upgrade feels fun, but it narrows the audience. The narrower the audience, the lower the price. The situation gets even worse if the modification looks rough. A clean, professional change still creates questions. A rough-looking change creates a conclusion. Now, we reach a modification that is not inherently bad at all, and can even be a value add, but only if it was done with discipline. Number 8. Jack plates, engine height experiments, and transom hardware. This is where the market becomes brutally practical, almost unforgiving. Most buyers already know that a jack plate can improve performance, efficiency, and even handling when it is done correctly. Plenty of high-quality boats leave the factory with one. So the problem is not the idea itself. The problem is what the installation quietly says says about everything underneath the engine. When a buyer walks up and sees mismatched hardware, rounded bolt heads, uneven washers, or sealant smeared instead of neatly set, their focus shifts instantly. They stop evaluating the outboard as a mechanical system and start evaluating the structure holding it in place. Once that happens, resale changes tone. A transom concern is not cosmetic. It is structural, expensive, and time-consuming to verify. Most buyers cannot core sample a transom or pull hardware during a casual inspection, so they are forced to read clues. Those clues add up fast. A tiny gap between plate and transom, a faint stress line in the gel coat, discoloration around a bolt, or sealant that looks reworked can trigger caution. The buyer imagines the motor bouncing at speed, the leverage of setback working the mounting surface, and small flex slowly becoming a larger problem. Even if none of that is true, the mental picture is enough to stall confidence. Reputable parts help, but they are not a shield. A premium jack plate installed carelessly still hurts resale. On the other side, a budget plate installed perfectly can still raise eyebrows, simply because it suggests experimentation with height, setback, or balance. Experimentation is not bad, but it signals a learning process the next owner did not witness. Structural doubt invites inspection. Tune doubt blocks inspection. A buyer cannot see the map, cannot confirm limits, cannot trust thresholds, so resale turns into discount math. Number 9. Engine control unit tunes, flashed maps, and unverifiable power claims. A tune is invisible, and that invisibility is exactly why it works so well in marketing and so poorly in resale. When an outboard is described as tuned, the buyer is forced to make a judgment without physical evidence. They cannot see the changes, they cannot confirm limits, they cannot tell what safeguards remain. All they have is a claim and a story. Some owners approach tuning carefully, staying within conservative margins. Others chase numbers, throttle response, or top end. The buyer has no reliable way to know which path was taken. They do not know what map is loaded, who wrote it, how it was tested, or whether factory protections were altered. Even if the seller explains everything honestly, the buyer still has to decide if the explanation covers every scenario. Most buyers do not want that responsibility. Dealer behavior amplifies this doubt. Many shops become cautious the moment tuning is mentioned, not because tuning is automatically destructive, but because diagnosis becomes more complex. If a tuned engine throws a fault, is it a mechanical issue or a calibration side effect? Thresholds, sensor logic, and response curves may no longer match factory expectations. Some dealers will work through that, some will not. Buyers are aware of that inconsistency, and it quietly lowers what they are willing to pay. There is also a layer of unspoken concern around liability and insurance. Buyers think about failure scenarios, even if they never say it out loud. They wonder how questions would be asked if something went wrong. That uncertainty, however small, reduces demand. The resale market consistently rewards engines that are easy to understand. A tune makes an engine harder to read, harder to verify, and harder to trust. Even when it adds performance, it subtracts clarity. And clarity, not speed, is what usually closes the deal. That leads directly into the final upgrade, the one that surprises people because it often comes from being a good owner. Number 10. Homemade reliability upgrades that remove factory evidence. This is the upgrade that quietly destroys value because, on the surface, it looks like good ownership. It is not about chasing speed or squeezing out performance. It is about simplifying maintenance, replacing aging parts, and cleaning up systems that look cluttered or overcomplicated. The problem is that resale is not judged by how sensible something feels to the owner. It is judged by how recognizable and verifiable it looks to the next person. When factory clamps are replaced with generic hardware, when hose routing no longer matches the factory sticker, when fasteners are swapped without consistency, the engine begins to look like it has been handled by too many hands. Buyers cannot easily tell whether those changes were thoughtful upgrades or quick improvisations. They cannot know if a cooling hose was rerouted because it improved flow, or because a brittle fitting snapped and the owner adapted. They cannot tell if the fuel system is now safer, or simply different from what the engine control unit expects. This uncertainty matters because buyers do not evaluate engines in a vacuum. They imagine future service. They imagine a mechanic opening the cowl and pausing, not because something is obviously wrong, but because nothing looks familiar. That pause costs time. Time turns into labor. Labor turns into money. Buyers may never say this out loud, but it factors into what they are willing to pay. A strong seller can sometimes overcome this doubt with documentation. Clear photos taken during the work, part numbers that show equivalent or upgraded components, receipts that establish intent and quality, and a calm explanation of what was changed and why can can all help. The problem is that most private listings do not include that level of detail. When information is missing, buyers default to caution, not because they assume something is wrong, but because they know they will be the ones paying to find out later. This is also where experienced mechanics become selective. A factory layout can be diagnosed quickly because it follows a known logic and known routing. A custom layout takes longer to interpret, even when executed well, and that time is never free. Buyers factor that in quietly. The harsh truth is that clean is not always valuable. Factory looking is valuable because it is legible, easy to audit, and easy to trust. If you want the best resale outcome, the rule is simple. Upgrade the boat, keep the engine legible, and save every original equipment manufacturer part you remove. If an upgrade cannot be reversed easily, treat it like a permanent choice, because the market often does. If this helped you avoid a resale hit, subscribe for more real outboard truth. And tell me in the comments what you have seen on a used engine that instantly makes you hesitate, even if the seller swears it is fine.